I think one of the interesting aspects of this whole incident or the trauma response is there's no clear-cut book on steps to take. And I've had a discussion with my chief about this. I remember he asked me the one day, when do you think guys should come back to work? Or when can we get patrol back on? I remember looking at him saying, this is going to be the hardest decision that you ever made in your life, but you're the chief and someone's going to have to make that decision. And I don't think there's any right or wrong answer to that, because there's a sense of when do we get back to being normal, but also there's a sense of how long do people need to heal. And I think that's one of the things that law enforcement going forward is going to have to take into consideration of what do we consider something that can be traumatic for officers, how long should we give them off, and what steps do we have to take to say, hey, everyone's ready to get back to work.
And for some people, it's like, I need to get back to work because I need that distraction, I need the structure, I need the routine. And for other people, it's like, I don't want to face this right now. And I think, like you said, there is no manual for that. There is a manual for, we're going to have this funeral and it's going to be full of ritual, and there's protocol. There's a protocol for the funeral and how that's going to happen and what you're going to experience there. And I've been to firefighter funerals before, and I actually remember the one I was at, we walked in our old engine 214 from the church. We walked back around to the firehouse, like a block. It was like a block and a half. We went through town, down through the block, went by the borough hall. They sounded the last alarm, and it's like, whoa, that's like goosebumps, right? And we get back, and the burial was going to be behind our firehouse. So we ended up, I ended up being one of the folding the flag, one of the flag folders, which was, it's just like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
This is really, there's such an honor to being involved in those. And I was involved, I was at both of the Duarte and the funeral for the Northern Regional Police. And what I saw was just so much coming together of all these departments from states, all over the United States. People from Alaska are coming. And this is typical for line of death duties. And it's just so amazing, the reverence of it, and just being able to witness that. And the Duarte funeral, I was kind of outside. My partner and I were kind of just walking around to support people. Yeah. If anybody needed anything, we would, kind of just check in and say, hey, how's it going? What's, you're okay? Good. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Good. And with this one, I was outside, and I was talking to some dispatchers and NYPD. And so I was like, oh, I'm pretty cool. I've been talking to these people, part of this. And at one point, I guess the state police were in charge of a lot of it. And they were telling us, we were standing like at the corner. And they said, all right, everybody standing here, go down and stand in the parking lot down below. There's a parking lot down below. So I just like, oh, okay. And so I wandered down there, and I end up in like a formation, a line of formation of like all these first responders that were like, it was like 6 deep and covered the whole parking lot. Yeah. And I saw this drone picture of me in it, and I'm standing there like, at whatever attention or at ease or whatever. And I was like, man, I look like I could be with the FBI. And this is the way I looked. I had these sunglasses on and a black suit. But I was so honored to be part of that. And listening to the commands, you could hear the commands coming down through the ranks, because we were down further from where the motorcade was coming in. Yeah. And just listening to that was just like, it was just something I don't think that you can't understand it unless you've experienced it.
Absolutely.
And to be just, kind of caught up in the being part of that and being able to honor people I didn't know, but I knew you, and I knew plenty of other folks that it was just such a moving and powerful experience.
Yeah. And like you were saying about returning to work, and some guys need to, that next morning at 7:00, I was in at the station because I didn't want to be home with my thoughts. I felt like I needed to be doing things, especially after that, because if I sit still and I'm not doing anything, then that's where that thoughts or the trauma starts to hurt a lot more. I was at the station at 7 in the morning, and I didn't know what to expect when I got in there. And when I got in, all three of the officers' cars were still sitting in the parking lot, and there was no one else there. And that was a very hard feeling. I sat there by myself in the station for about 15 minutes until I went down to the hospital to be with our injured officers. So that was such a unique memory in my mind of just being there. Everything was quiet. No one was there. There was no other cars there, just their cars. And then that time frame from there till the funeral, it's like, okay, we have the funeral next week. Like, let's get there. Let's get through the funerals.
One thing at a time kind of thing.
Yeah.
We know what this looks like, but we're trying to figure out what everything else looks like.
And I remember Duarte's funeral, when they announced the date and the time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go, and I wasn't because I didn't want to honor him. I just was afraid of how much that would hurt me being there. So that was tough, but I'm glad I went. So, the chief was asking for volunteers to speak at the funeral for these guys. I mean, each one of them has had such a giant impact on my career. So, when I was told, hey, you are going to be one of the ones speaking, I was honored to be able to talk about each one of them individually and just be up on stage and tell everyone how great of guys that they were.
You did a great job too. That is not easy to do, especially in front of their families, first of all, sitting right there in front of you, and then the whole auditorium full of your fellow officers. And you nailed it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was scary, especially when you see the governor sitting there and Attorney General Dave Sunday and those people, and you're like, oh wow, these are some pretty big people that you see there. So, but scariness for that is out the picture, because you're like, hey, I need to do this. I need to tell everyone how great of guys they were, and just be able to honor each and every one of them individually.
Let me ask you this, because I was able to speak at both of my parents' funerals. Like, I did the eulogy for both of them, and I found that to be such a healing process for me. Like putting together some words that resonated, that would resonate not only with my family but with the people that were there. And was that experience somewhat? Was there some sense of, like, I don't know, like connection or I did this, and I'm really glad I could.
Yeah, I mean, it felt good to be able to go up on stage and just be able to say, hey, these are how great these guys were, and this is how much they meant to us. And I think that was evident in our funeral, or our procession from the scene to the coroner's office. I wish I would have recorded it, but that's not a thought in your mind at that point, because you're in serious shock. I mean, it was horrible. But to see the streets lined from Spring Grove, I mean, lined shoulder to shoulder, 3-4 people deep, the whole way to the coroner's office is crazy. It's amazing.
Yeah. I talked to two of the guys that were in the motorcade, and they were talking about, how that was made a really big impression on them. And the fact that, and that night, as I recall, because I went to the station, when you guys left for that, we went home, and I turned on the news to see what the coverage was. And I saw the footage of people standing in the rain, and they had flags, and it was like, it even gives me goosebumps to think about it now. So being a part of that had to be really powerful too.
Absolutely. And one of the things that always comes to my mind with this, and just my wife and kids were down to watch everyone go by, and in the weeks after that, if I wouldn't be home at a certain time, because my son, he's 6 years old, he knew what was going on. If I wasn't home, or I was getting home late, or if I was busy, he'd be asking, where's daddy? And that's something that sticks in my mind, because I'm like, well, these other families have kids, and those same thoughts are going to be there too. But what do you tell them? And that's something that just sad to think about.
I think sometimes we don't think of the spillover, that we think of the officers, we want to make sure they're okay. And I think we're starting to think more about the families, the spouses and the kids of what they're doing. I know Ed is doing some debriefings with some families in one of the departments down in New York, and just kind of touching on how that impacts them, how calls like that and how the job impacts them in terms of their level of kind of their radar is up about, they hear calls and they know, and like, I don't know if it's one of the first things you think of, like when this happened, to call home and say, hey, I'm okay. And I think that's what people were thinking a lot of. There was a lot of calls going like, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Except for, unfortunately, from those guys.
And that's, I mean, from the UPMC incident, as soon as I could, I posted something on my personal Facebook just saying, I'm okay. And I did that with this incident too. And I had quite a few people tell me like, hey, when I heard what happened, I got on to see right away and your post was there. So you're the only one I knew at the department. So it made me feel better that you were okay. So, but the amount of text and phone calls is absolutely overwhelming. I mean, from the time that I left my training to the time that I was getting to the station, the amount of texts and phone calls that I had, there was no way I could answer all of them. And it's hard to just get that out to people like, hey, I'm okay.
Yeah. And I think on the other hand, it breaks your heart to know that the three families weren't going to get that call. They were going to get a different call, and they were going to get police or state police, whoever went to deliver that news. They were going to get that, and they're going to know immediately, when they show up, that, this is what this is.
Kind of have that same thought in their mind too of, there's no way this is my significant other. There's no way this is my family member. Like, please have him be the injured. Please have him be something else. And it's just kind of a shock, or just so much worry at that point just to get that. So
I can't imagine what it was like for those families waiting and not hearing anything from their loved ones.
Yeah. I know you and I talked about how long some of this stuff lasts, and I'll give an example from yesterday. I won't give any specific names, but I've was told to deliver some patches to some family members of one of the fallen officers, and we were really busy yesterday, and I was like, yeah, I'll get to it. I'll be able to do it. So I texted a few of the guys and said, I didn't want to cry today, but I did. And it was nice. But also it caught me off guard, and I went and delivered patches, and ended up spending about 30 minutes just sharing nice, funny stories, and just kind of caught me off guard. It was like, oh wow, like, and this stuff just keeps coming back, and you don't know when it's going to come back.
Exactly.
You don't know. I mean, sometimes you could be walking into a store and someone could say, hey, I'm just want to say thank you. I'm so-and-so's family member. And next thing you know, 30 minutes later, you're sitting there and talking to them, still telling them about your experiences with them. So could strike at any moment. And I think that's one of the things that we've said is just being more mentally aware and mentally strong, or working on towards traumatic responses. It definitely helps you in those situations, so you're not caught off guard and you don't have some sort of negative response or lasting response to that.
And I just want to ask you about like the change in mentality maybe of police, to suck it up and just keep going. I mean, like you're talking about, you cried going through it, and that's a vulnerable thing to do, clearly, especially for a police officer. And do you think that some of these events and some of these things that have happened are starting to change that suck it up mentality for some people, maybe not for everybody?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that guys are becoming more aware of that, especially with what's happened in York County this year. It's been so hard for law enforcement that guys are becoming more aware of, hey, I need to make sure that that I'm okay. And I mean, I've told people that too. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to cry. And, um, I mean, that's one thing that we talk about in therapy is that it's such a good relief. And, um, sometimes you just can't hold that back. And sometimes it's not worth trying to hold it back. It hurts more. So, um, it's the most I've ever seen cops cry as a result of this incident. I will say that. And, to stand up in front of a group of guys or a platoon of guys and just say, hey, here we are. We're out here. You know, we got to go to work. We got to do our jobs. It's really hard to stand up there and be the motivator. But we're starting to get to a point now where guys are getting back into a sense of normalcy of how do we get out there and do our patrol and stuff like that, which is what these guys would have wanted.
Absolutely.
Every single.
Yeah. And I think, we talk about normal, and I think, how is anything normal now? And sometimes the word reality, it's a new reality,
Yeah.
Or it's a new abnormal. I also saw that somewhere. This is a new abnormal. There's a new reality to your lives, to everything kind of surrounding your work. And I when you were talking about officers crying, I was thinking that's your officers, but you're humans first. And sometimes when you have on that uniform, that's almost like it's a protection of some sort.
Yeah.
It changes your mentality sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think when you step back from that, that's when all that human emotion comes in.
Yeah. And one thing that I've always discussed in therapy is, when I put on that uniform, I don't want to say I'm a superhero or like Batman, Superman, but that's what it's like for me. Like when I'm not working, I'm not saying I wouldn't help someone, but it's so much easier when I have the uniform on. When I see someone or I see someone standing outside the store asking for money or see someone in need, it's so much easier in uniform just to walk up and just have a conversation when I'm off duty or not working. Like sometimes that thought's in your mind, like, I'm not working right now, so someone else will help them.
Yeah.
So it's so much easier to put on that uniform and be able to do that sort of thing. But one thing my grandpa, when he was still alive, one thing when I became a law enforcement officer, he looked at me and told me, don't stop ever treating people like they're people. Something that stuck in my mind.
What great advice, yeah. When you think about, the aftermath of all this and sort of the trauma reactions that you have, after the Duarte shooting, Ed and I went to Hack to the police academy. They asked us to come talk to the cadets. This was between the event and the funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not realize what the impact that had on me, because first of all, I'd never been to the police academy.
Mm-hmm.
So we walk in and all these cadets stand up and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. This is really cool. And when I started talking, I started kind of choking on my words almost. I got this frog that I couldn't get rid of. And I was like, kept trying to clear my throat and it wouldn't go away. And I'm like, what is this? What is happening? And then we had to go talk because it happened at a UPMC, and the Hack nursing program had some nurses, supervisors, and we were asked to sit down and do a Zoom with any of them that wanted to come in. We're sitting like we are at this table with the TV here, and we start talking, and the same thing starts happening. I'm like, like what is this?
Yeah.
And Ed looked at me and says, "This is really getting to you, isn't it? This got you, didn't it?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he said, and I started crying.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah. And then I started talking about something else, like some other incident that had happened. And I'm like, but they all get linked together. Like, oh, there's a common thread to all the trauma. But that was the first time that I'd ever experienced a trauma response where, for whatever reason, that frog in my throat wouldn't go away.
Yeah.
It was just weird.
And to think about that, and one thing that in our sizzle debrief said that came to my attention is I never thought about from my perspective. I mean, I've thought about, I run a department, oh my gosh, how this affect them, but what about the dispatchers? What about the medics that were on scene? What about the coroner's office? Our coroner's office treated our officers, and the funeral home, and just all of that. And it's a different feeling when it's someone that you know
Mm-hmm.
or someone that you've worked with than if it's you show up to a scene and you have no idea who that person is.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those don't hurt or don't have that emotional response at all. I mean, obviously there's some that are more traumatic than others, but if you show up to a death that's natural causes and it's an elderly person, they knew they were going to pass, that it doesn't bother me as much. It's different when it's someone that had such a large impact on everyone.
Right. And then when it's somebody you don't know, you've learned to detach yourself from it almost because you have to do the job. And, we can compartmentalize some things, but some things just like I talk about the file, the trauma file we have and all those folders of calls that we've been on. And sometimes that file door stays shut, but sometimes it gets open and some of those folders fall out and you're like, oh, there's that call and there's that call. Now there's this call on top of it.
And one thing I've learned talking to some of our officers who have started, really focusing on going to therapy and just talking to them and knowing from my experiences is what I've kind of felt is that I have this little lockbox, and it seems like when I have something serious, it's like my emotions, they get put in there, they get locked, they get shut, and I kind of become sort of like a emotionless person at some point. Like it kind of stays locked in there, and I feel like that's how law enforcement has been. Is we're tough. We don't need help. Throw it in that box. It's locked. You're good to go. Go on to the next thing. And what I've learned for me personally is that's not good, because that comes back at some point. That box gets broken open. Could be a call. Could be something small. Could be something big. And then if you haven't been treating it or haven't been looking at that or considering that you have that, it really spills over hard.
Yeah. And it could be, anything could unlock that box. It could be something personal or something professional, or maybe even a combination of both, because trauma doesn't know. Trauma doesn't know, hey, this is a professional thing, don't feel anything, or this is a personal thing, it's okay to feel something. Trauma doesn't know. It's just there.
Yeah.
And I think it's just so interesting how those things, there's these common threads that just kind of weave through all of those experiences. And I've told so many people, you can't outrun your grief. And I think the same thing is true for trauma. You can't outrun your trauma because it's there. It's that fish. It's that fossil kind of embedded in there. And sooner or later, you deal with it one way or another. You may not come to therapy and deal with it, but some people drink, or some people try to sleep, or some people do exercise like there's no tomorrow. But we have coping skills. Sometimes they're positive, sometimes they're not, but we use them whether we even realize it or not.
Yeah, especially in law enforcement, I feel like if guys aren't looking at it, if they're treating it or coping with alcohol, that's not good at all.
Right. And I'm always, I think about, as we're sitting here talking, I'm kind of going through my mind some of the officers and some of the first responders that I've treated here, and just the vulnerability they have when they open up about this stuff. And the other thing that is so interesting is, like in your case, that once you seek help and once you kind of figure out what this is all about, like what is going on for me. I think I've asked officers to share their stories, and I've put a little book together about living forward that uses some of the cases that I've worked with. And to me, the thing that's amazing about that is how willing they were to say, yes, please use my story. If it will help somebody else, please use my story. They don't want to hide behind it anymore. Like they've hidden behind it for long enough. And then they realize that help is available. And I think that's what, help is available. And there are very competent therapists that can help people through some of this. There's very competent peers that can help people through this. And once they realize that, I think it's like a huge weight lifted off. I don't know if you felt that when you started therapy. There's like a weight that gets lifted off.
I got to a point where I was like, wow, this has helped me. There was incidents from the start of my career that I didn't realize how much they were bothering me. And once I got past the point of them really bothering me, I realized like I need to start telling people this is okay. Um, and it is. That was one thing that I started telling people. Like, I go to therapy. I have a therapist that I think is great, and I will comment that took me 3 different therapists till I found one. The first one was very religious based. It didn't flow with what I wanted to talk about. The second one, I went to one appointment with, and I was like, "Wow, is this what therapy is? I'm never going back."
Yeah.
And then when my mom got diagnosed with brain cancer, and she's like, one thing one of my wishes is for you to make sure you're okay.
Aw.
So I found someone. I was like, oh wow, great, finally. So
Yeah.
I feel like that's such a hard thing for law enforcement, is because we aren't trusting of people. We want to know people's background. We want to know, how can you help us? Like, what experience do you have with cops? Which is one of the great things with your offices is, hey, we focus on a lot of first responders, a lot of law enforcement. So guys feel a little more comfortable with that. And just to be able to stand in front of guys and say, hey, this is okay. This is normal. If you need help, we can get you help. You will feel better. It's great. It is great to be able, and that was one of the goals of coming here and being able to sit down and talk, is just say, this is okay. We get into a lot of situations that hurt. They suck. They're going to come back, and just be able to say, it's okay to come seek help.
Right.
Is my goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want people to know it's okay.
Absolutely.
Talk to someone.
And I want people, I guess what I would want people to know, that like we are here, we want to help.
Yeah.
Like, and I think the biggest deal is that trust building. Like, and it's in any therapy, in any kind of therapy with anybody, is, the most important thing we can build is a good rapport and trust. But it's even a higher level when it comes to first responders, and I think sometimes even higher with police officers. And so when we do these kind of things, when we show up for these events, when we show up to do wellness checks, we talk about, if something happens and we're called in, at least you know us and you can trust us. You don't have to be worried that the confidentiality aspect and all that. And I just think it's just, to me, I am grateful to have, my first responder, my career in first responderhood back in the, I won't say like the late 80s, early 90s, kind of came full circle with the ability to do what I'm doing now.
Absolutely.
In the first responder world. And to me, I don't take it lightly. I can't take it lightly, because I think I would never want to break the trust that we have started to develop with the departments that we're working with.
Yeah. And I've had that discussion with my therapist. I said, are you sure it's okay with me recommending all these first responders and law enforcement? Are you sure you want to deal with that?
Yeah.
And the answer was, yeah, I enjoy it. And I'm like, okay. Because I feel like, hey, I don't know what your normal clientele is, but we carry a different, I shouldn't say different, but there's definitely we're responding to incidents that are traumatic. So it's a different experience than something that may have happened in the past that you're trying to get over. So, which, obviously if officers had that too, that's something that could carry over into their career that they need to be aware of.
And I think the difference, when you want to talk about the difference, I think the difference is that the exposure to trauma is so much more than the average citizen would have. And Jamie knows the statistics maybe better than I might, but you're responding to, the average person may have like 3 or 4 traumatic incidents, and first responders, police officers, they have like 20 in a sometimes it feels like 20 in a week.
You never know. You never know.
The exposure to trauma is so much higher, and the potential for exposure to trauma is so much higher.
You could go weeks, months without doing anything. And I'll give a brief example of that. I was training a new guy a few years ago, and he looked at me. He goes, "Hey, Andy, I've never seen a dead person before." And I looked at him. I just shook my head. This is New Year's Eve. Shook my head. I said, "Why did you say that?"
Yeah.
I swear, the next call we got was a cardiac arrest. We were there within a minute. Had to do CPR, put the AED pads on, and the woman regained the pulse, but then died on the way to the hospital. and it was cold out. We're all sweaty in it. I'm like, hey, let's take a minute. Let's process this. We don't gotta go out and do anything right now. Just I want to make sure that this settles in. That you're not like, hey, I want to talk about it or anything like that. So we're getting a snack, drinking some water. Dispatch says, hey, are you clear from that call? I said, oh, we're about to. What do you have? And cardiac arrest. Well, we were out of AED pads now because we only carried one at the time, and first one on scene again. And 45-year-old guy was in cardiac. We had to do CPR on him for probably 15 minutes until EMS got there. It was a long time.
That's a long time.
And we left there going, wow. I mean, you're in a shelter. I mean, even at that point, I was like, wow, back to back. That's hard. Okay. And then the next call we had was a break. And that was the end of our day. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. And I looked at him and said, never tell me that again. Yeah. Never say to me again, I've never seen a dead person.
Keep your mouth shut.
So,
yeah.
You never know. You could go months without having to do any of that. And then all of a sudden you could get back to back calls where it's like, holy cow, like what just happened?
Yeah. I know when I did my ride along with you, we were chasing, were they fake inspection stickers? I learned all about fake inspection stickers. So now I'm on the lookout for them. I'm going to do a citizen's arrest or something. I know that's
jump out and point at them.
And then the next day you texted me and said like the first call you had was something like a
3-2 situation.
Yeah, and I was like, oh well, I got the fake bumper, the fake gun. I think sometimes somebody's looking out for me. I want to do this stuff. Yeah, but it's an honor to be able to sit and talk with you about our mutual experiences, our separate experiences.
Absolutely.
And bring it all together. Hopefully that will help, people that listen to this.
Yeah. It was my pleasure to talk to you as well.
Of course.